Hello and welcome to the 2022 U.S. Construction Outlook webinar. My name is Michael Drost and I am the Marketing Manager for the Construction Business Unit at US CAD. And I'll be our moderator or one of our moderators for our webinar today. Before we begin, I want to go through our agenda. We'll start with some initial housekeeping items for today's webinar, and then we will go into a summary of US CAD, who we are and what we do. And then we'll dive into the presentation, the 2022 US Construction Outlook, featuring Ken Simonson. After that, we will begin our expert live panel discussion. And then we'll move on to Q&A, and then we'll conclude with some next steps for attendees to take if they are interested in learning more. So some housekeeping items. The webinar is scheduled to last 1 hour with time for Q&A. The participant audio and video is disabled. You will be able to post questions in the Q&A function at any time. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent by email to attendees over the next couple of business days. And after the webinar, please feel free to connect with US CAD and our expert panelists on LinkedIn. So a little bit about US CAD. We are a full service AEC technology consultant connecting companies with the software, hardware, training, and consulting they need to achieve their business goals. We offer a wide variety of services from BIM software and implementation to training and consulting to staff augmentation and production services to scan to BIM. We partner with some of the AEC industry's most innovative solutions, including Autodesk, who we are a platinum partner with, Bluebeam, Leica, as well as many others. We also partner with thousands of AEC firms across the US, many of whom are listed in ENR's top lists. And we have numerous locations throughout the US with AEC experts who are available to you at the local level. And I just will do a shameless plug. US CAD has recently launched our Construction Cosmos newsletter, which is your source for everything construction. You can sign up for that, and that's a monthly newsletter that'll be sent to your inbox, and it has blogs, articles, news, white papers, and videos, as well as exclusive access to past recordings of our webinars. So if you are interested, please feel free to sign up for that if you haven't done so already. And so now I'm going to actually throw it off to Nick Krey, who is our business unit, or excuse me, our construction business unit director, and he'll be moderating the rest of the discussion, and he'll introduce Ken Simonson, who will be presenting the 2022 outlook for construction.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I'd invite Ken and Matt to come off of cameras off as we introduce, and then we'll hand it back off to Ken. But a quick introduction. Yeah, thank you, Michael, for the intro. And yeah, as you mentioned, I am the director here at US CAD for the Construction Business Unit. But it's not about me; it's about our panelists and our presenter. So Ken Simonson, if you don't know, you might be living under a rock. He is the chief economist at AGC, Associated General Contractors of America. Ken has been the chief economist, the leading trade association for the construction industry since 2001. It provides a lot of insight into the economy. You're going to just get a lot of value out of today's presentation and related industries. He's got 40 years of experience that he's bringing, analyzing, advocating, and communicating about economic and tax issues, I'm sure which we'll hit today. And Ken has got economics from the University of Chicago and an MA in economics from Northwestern. We were joking right prior to the call. I don't know where he finds the time, but we're really glad to have him here today. And joining us, Matthew Cordova. He's the director of technology, construction technology rather, at Hermanson Company, based out of Kent, Washington. Hermanson Company provides mechanical contracting services from sheet metal, piping, plumbing, design build, you name it, Hermanson does it, serving healthcare, life sciences, government, military, and the education sectors. So thank you, gentlemen, both for being here today. And Ken, Matt and I will go off camera and mute. I will remind the audience, you can ask questions directly. We are going to hit at the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A section. While we do have questions we can ask one another, we love your participation to get your input and would love to answer your questions in real time. So with that, Ken, take it away.
All right. Well, glad to be back with you, Nick. And let me start with the slide that shows total farm, non-farm employment. I want to talk about employment, spending, and materials costs, supply chain issues as I'm seeing it at the national level. Would welcome Matt's on-the-ground perspective about this. As you heard, AGC is the leading national construction trade association. We have over 27,000 member companies who belong through a network of 89 chapters in every state. And they do every type of construction other than single-family home building. So of course, I keep an eye on that side too. And this slide shows what's happened to both residential and non-residential construction employment since the month before the pandemic hit in February 2020. At first, both residential, which covers general contractors, building home builders, and also specialty trade contractors, whether they're doing new homes or additions and renovations to existing homes. Both residential and non-residential construction, which covers general contractors, specialty trade contractors, and heavy and civil engineering firms, they lost about 1 million employees between them in just 2 months. But their employment bounced back much faster than total non-farm payroll employment, that headline figure you hear about on the first business day of each month, shown here by the green line. After May of 2020, though, things diverged. Residential construction kept adding employees at a very steady clip, surpassed that February 2020 level by the end of that year, and has continued adding employees almost every month right up until January of this year, whereas non-residential construction stalled for over a year. But in the last 4 months of 2021, it did add employees again at a strong pace. Well, what's happened since then is that construction employment would have been even stronger if contractors had been able to get hold of the workers that they needed. And I see this slide's a bit jumbled, but it should say job openings in December 2021 totaled 273,000. That was on the last business day of December. And that was a 29% jump from a year ago. In fact, job openings surpassed the number of people hired in the entire month of December. So the implication is contractors would have hired more than twice as many people as they did if they'd had enough qualified applicants. And that, I'm afraid, is going to be a theme throughout 2022. Well, the next slide shows there's been huge variation from state to state. We have about half the states, 23 states and DC, have now returned to at least the employment level of February 2020, if not surpassed it. But the range is enormous. South Dakota, which never fell below that February 2020 level, is now up more than 10%. At the low end, you have Louisiana and Wyoming, very energy dependent states, down by double digits, and New York State, which suffered an outflow of residents from New York City. And since then, still not seeing foreign visitors, business travelers, and not nearly as many domestic visitors. So employment in construction has really lagged there as it has in a few other states. AGC is fortunate that we have very responsive members. Over 1,000 of them answered our annual survey late last year. We released these results on January 12th, and the members are much more upbeat than they were a year ago. 3/4 of them expect to increase their headcount over the next 12 months, but they know it won't be easy. 3/4 said that it would be as hard or harder to hire than it was a year ago. And let me turn now to what's going on in construction spending. This is a series that comes from the Census Bureau on the first business day of each month, and they call it value put in place. So they're trying to measure how much was spent or incurred on projects already underway. You may be familiar with figures from Dodge Data and Analytics. They put out their monthly figures just yesterday, I think, showing the total value of starts that took place in a given month. And Construct Connect does the same thing. They're privately collecting that information. They identify the projects that they think broke ground or otherwise qualified as a start, and they put the full value into the database that month, and then it disappears. So their figures are a lot more volatile than these census numbers, which are what we call a coincident indicator. In fact, they feed directly into the gross domestic product estimates each quarter. They're both valid ways of looking at what's going on, but there is a couple of things to keep in mind. First, neither the Dodge or Construct Connect nor the census numbers are adjusted for inflation, and obviously that's a big part of the story right now. Second, the census figures show a huge difference, and so do the Dodge and Construct Connect, between residential construction. So while total spending appears to be up 8%, part of that is just from inflation. It's not real in terms of square footage or some other metric of units. But as soon as you peel back the layers of that onion, you see these huge differences. Private residential, whether single or multifamily or not squeezed in here, additions and renovations to existing project homes up by a strong double-digit percentages, whereas both private, non-residential, and public spending are down a little bit. That negative number has actually been shrinking nicely. And as you can see on the rest of this slide, it's quite a checkerboard of black and red, where black means the 2021 total exceeded the 2020 total, whether it's a full category under following a bullet point or subcategories. They're both listed in descending order of 2021 size. So to start at the top, power construction came in just about flat, but there's a significant difference. The Census Bureau counts every form of power generation, transmission, local distribution, as you would expect, but then they also add in the spending on oil and gas fields and pipelines, and that piece was down by about 5%. I don't think it's going to recover much, if at all, this year, whereas electric power may be a major growth category, as we've seen the start of immense offshore wind projects off the East Coast, and bigger wind and solar projects on land. These will all require new transmission and huge storage, whether battery storage or pumped storage. Highway and street construction wound up the year just about flat. Now, with the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act last November, we will see big growth in highway and street construction over the next several years, but the timing of that remains uncertain. It depends in part on Congress finishing work on the 2022 appropriations bills. That's for the fiscal year that actually began October 1st. And we're right now operating under what's called a continuing resolution, which means spending is held back at last year's levels. And now it's looking as if it won't be until mid-March, if not later, before Congress passes a bill that would actually allow more highway and street funds to flow to state governments. Education is a category that certainly suffered during 2021, but I am reading more and more work going on in terms of upgrading HVAC systems in primary and secondary schools and other kinds of school modernization. We'll also get selective new school construction in areas where people have moved to that didn't previously have enough school capacity. So smaller metro areas or even outside of metro areas. But the higher ed side is really likely to remain depressed for quite a while. Not only is the cohort of high school seniors getting smaller as we work through the baby bust, but foreign students who typically have been full pay students have not been returning. Either they haven't been able to get visas or they're afraid of being stuck here, as many of them were in March of 2020 when universities and colleges shut down. And then more and more students or would-be students are questioning the need or value of going to college, incurring a lot of student debt when the job market is so wide open right now, even for people without a degree or people trying to change careers. Commercial is a category that gets used in a lot of different ways. For census, it means warehouse, retail, and farm construction. And as you might expect, the warehouse category growing very strongly, retail suffering. It's actually narrowed that negative, but I don't think it's going to turn positive in a significant way, at least not get back to pre-pandemic levels. Now, office construction looks pretty mediocre. It's down 6%. The reality is a good deal worse. All of these non-residential categories include renovation and even repurposing, as we're seeing happen with some older office buildings being turned into apartments or other uses. But also the office category includes data centers. It's very frustrating to me that we don't have data on data centers, but if we did, I'm sure that would show up as one of the major growth categories, meaning that the remainder new office construction is down a good deal worse than 6%. In contrast, manufacturing has turned positive in a big way in just the last few months. And the major difference is in that computer, electronic, and electric manufacturing sector, where we have tremendous $20 billion projects going on in Arizona, $17 billion in Texas, another $12 billion in Arizona. And the announcement earlier this month that Intel would spend another $20 billion outside of Columbus, Ohio. Meanwhile, the largest manufacturing subcategory, chemical, includes pharmaceuticals, and that would include vaccines and medicines. And many manufacturers are adding new production lines for those. Transportation equipment, while it's down slightly, I think this will also be a growth category in 2022 for new electrified vehicles, certainly huge battery plants and other parts or components for vehicles. And then food processors have been adding production lines to produce more for groceries and direct-to-home delivery. Transportation down across the board. This is another category that will get funding through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, but I don't think it's going to turn into this put in place series in 2022. And then healthcare, up slightly and hospitals leading the way, but over a longer period, I think more healthcare is going to be delivered through special care facilities outside of hospitals, medical buildings, doctors' offices, and other non-hospital centers. Now, lodging doesn't even belong on this list in that it's much smaller than even the 9th biggest category where I have it now, but I've stuck it in just because the decline has been so dramatic. We may have touched bottom on lodging, but I don't see a rebound coming soon. Let me move on to what's happening to costs. The top line here is should have been labeled inputs to new non-residential construction. This looks like an incomplete crossword puzzle. April 2020 to December 2021, up 30.1%. And meanwhile, what I call the bid price index, the formal name is the producer price index for new non-residential building construction, that climbed by 12.5%, 12.6% from the low point in April 20 up through December 21. Well, those differences represent the pain that contractors are feeling from not being able to pass through all of the costs they're experiencing. There have been many contributors to that cost increase. This shows 6 of them. The producer price index for steel mill products more than doubled over that 20-month period. Lumber and plywood and copper and brass mill shapes up by almost 2/3. Plastic and aluminum products almost 1/2. Gypsum products up by 1/4. And many others have also gone up more than the 13% for bid prices. Well, note also that the steepest increase when everything was going up occurred in the first half of 2021. Since then, we've seen a lot of volatility. That's why you have such a spaghetti tangle of lines going in different directions in the last few months. And I think that will be the story in 2022. Probably not new record prices, but a lot of ups and downs. And that can be as dangerous in its way as a straight upward trend where a contractor knows they have to put in a contingency for further price increases. Now they may bet that the price increases are over, and if they just bid it at current prices, they'll be able to be winners in a few months, and then they get caught on the other side of that bet. So it is still a hazardous time. In our survey, 84% of the firms said they'd been caught on the wrong side of cost increases last year. They'd been higher than anticipated. 72% said projects had taken longer than anticipated. So now 2/3 of them said they're putting higher prices into bids or contracts, and nearly half have put in longer completion times. And it does sound as if owners have been accepting those higher bids more than they have in the past. How long can this last? Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I have a rear view mirror. And what it shows here is that for 28 months from late 2009 to the beginning of 2012, contractors were hemorrhaging profits because the year-over-year change in input prices exceeded the year-over-year change in bid prices. It happened again throughout 2017 and 2018, with just a brief exception. It hasn't gone on that long yet this time, but you can see the peak is twice as high as ever before, meaning the pain is that much more intense. Let me go back to our survey one last time. We asked, do you expect the value of projects available to bid on to be higher or lower than the year before? And this year, for 15 of the 17 categories, more contractors were optimistic than pessimistic. To take just the top example, 63% of the respondents said they expect there to be more bridge or highway work to bid on, and only 5% said less. The difference between those two numbers on an unrounded basis gives you a net positive reading of 57 percentage points. And so it is through nearly all of these categories. There were only 2 categories that contractors were net negative about, and that by a small margin: private office and retail. A big turnaround from the sentiment of a year ago. Personally, I think that recovery for the overall economy looks quite certain now that Omicron is retracting so rapidly. But contractors are going to be lagging because owners, whether they were businesses planning to expand, investors and lenders who have lost out on rent, institutions like universities or government agencies like airport authorities, they've all lost huge amounts of revenue, had unbudgeted expenses, and have a lot of question about how soon more facilities will be needed. There are some categories that have certainly done well. I already mentioned data centers and distribution facilities, manufacturing coming on strong lately, and some categories of energy and healthcare. There are 2 things I'm really concerned about, though, with regard to labor force. First of all, there's an ongoing survey of Facebook users. Admittedly, that's not a scientific sample, but a very large one. And the results have been quite consistent that in the last week of December, 58% of the respondents who said they worked in construction said they'd been vaccinated, compared to 84% of respondents from other occupations. The implication is that contractors are going to have a harder time filling their workforces with healthy workers or workers who are eligible to go onto sites where the owner requires anybody to be vaccinated. The other concern, apart from the pandemic effects directly, is that the premium, as I call it, for construction wages to get people to come to a job that you have to be outdoors doing heavy physical work in any weather from a fixed early hour, that premium has eroded in the last few years as businesses that historically paid much less have greatly upped their starting pay. Some are paying starting and retention bonuses. I'm thinking of things like fast food, warehouse, and local delivery businesses. And then other industries are able to offer flexible hours of work from home or hybrid working. And you can see on this line graph that historically construction paid 20 to 23% more than other industries. That gap is down to 17%. And so I think here the implication is the contractors are going to have to accelerate the pay increases even more, pay more overtime for the workers they do have, spend more on recruitment and training, spend more on ways of making do with fewer workers or workers with lower skill levels, whether that's robotics and advanced technology on the job site or more off-site production. It's going to vary by project type. Well, let me close with a couple of observations about the longer run. We've seen a dramatic slowdown in population growth, and that means eventually lower demand for home construction, the associated streets and underground utilities, schools, libraries, public safety buildings, and slower revenue growth for local governments. The shift from retail to e-commerce is permanent, and the e-commerce structures keep evolving. More of those last mile delivery points, more hybrid retail and distribution buildings, more conversion of empty retail buildings into distribution, and so forth. Healthcare, as I said, will keep devolving away from hospitals, and energy moving heavily toward offshore and onshore wind, solar, transmission, and battery storage, and battery charging stations, several 100,000 possibly. All of that will require new manufacturing capacity, much of it located in the US. Well, here's a slide that shows where population changed last year. And not only did the US population slow to the lowest growth rate in the 121-year history of this series, but for the first time, 18 states, those in deep red, lost population. The population growth was concentrated in the Intermountain West, Texas, the Southeast, and Delaware. And I think that will continue to be the pattern. The shading may change, but the Midwest and the Northeast parts of the country will remain very slow growth to negative growth. That's my story. I'm sticking to it until I get new data. When I do, you can catch it in the Data Digest, my weekly one-page summary of economic news relevant to construction. Just email me at ken.simonson@agc.org, and I'll add you to the email list. I'll also send along our newly posted Construction Inflation Alert, an 8-page guide to what's happening with materials costs, supply chain issues, and labor availability. And I can also send an updated set of these slides. So with that, let me see what questions you have.
Well, thank you, Ken, for invite you to come back to the screen, or rather turn your camera back on, as well as unmute. And then Ken, I lost your video, but I'm sure you can join us here in a second. As you're coming back in, there is a question from the Q&A section, and I'll try and do it justice. For state employment change statistics, and I do believe this is for you, Ken, for state employment change statistics, are there any states with significant labor agreement issues that are affecting the numbers? Their example provided was that the Seattle Teamsters strike is really starting to affect job sites, yet the numbers show an increase in Washington.
Right. Normally we get state and even metro data about 2 weeks after the national figures, but every year the Bureau of Labor Statistics updates those past figures in March. So right now we don't have January numbers. We'll be getting those around the middle of March. But at any rate, they would not capture the full effect of the Teamsters strike, which I understand is going on and is affecting more projects now. But these employment figures that are too dated to have that.
Ken, you went off mute, or you went on mute there for a second. Are you still with us?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, so that was the, oh, and right as we answered that one in the chat. So let's see. I haven't read this one yet. In what specific material inflation do you see happening the most? Also, when do you anticipate the supply chain returning to normal? Yeah, I think you can actually see the Q&A questions as well, Ken, if you wanted to take another look at it. But yeah, what specific material inflation do you see happening the most? And when do you anticipate the supply chain returning to quote unquote normal?
Well, it is quite a different story from what we were seeing 8 to 12 months ago, in that steel prices at the raw steel level really peaked around Labor Day, and they've been coming down very steeply. In fact, at least one measure of those steel market updates, hot rolled coil price has been pretty much symmetrical. It's back down to where it was 12 months ago, and the lead times have come down even more steeply, and that's usually a good indicator that you'll see further price decreases. However, That's not the story at the fabricator level or the steel service center. That there are obviously steps between when a slab or a bloom or a hot rolled coil is produced, and you get that bar joist or roofing fastener or other types of construction steel. So while those prices probably didn't go up as much, the lead times have just gotten crazy from what I hear, and I'm not hearing that those have really improved yet. So that remains a big problem. Lumber also set records early last year, came back down very sharply, and then it zoomed up again. And in the last month, it's just been bouncing. Looking at the lumber futures, has been bouncing every day by several percentage points. So what I expect this year is a lot of volatility. As I said, probably not new records because we got incredibly high last year, but nevertheless, it's going to be very challenging for contractors who are expecting delivery at a certain time to then learn that no, it's coming in 2 months, and you got to scramble to change the order in which you do things. But I'd love to hear from Matt as to what he's actually experiencing on these things.
You read my mind, Ken. I was going to say, let's send it over to Matt, see from his point of view, how that's being addressed or measured even potentially.
Yeah, so it's, for things like supply chain and things like that, our biggest struggle is, maintaining schedules. We're set to be on site and installing at a specific time. So getting through some of the technology portion a little bit early, if you're going through BIM coordination or anything like that, is paramount. The sooner we can get through that, the sooner we can order material, plan staging. If you can get through bulk orders to prep for a larger project, that's a decent way to attack that. Another thing that was kind of brought up is finding workers, right? What we're finding qualified workers is difficult. The problem we're seeing is a wave of older generational workers retiring and lack of younger people jumping into a skilled trade. So it's creating like a lopside in that we think is going to be super hard to overcome. We need to combat this, I think, with education. Construction isn't always, hard backbreaking labor for pennies. Jumping into a skilled trade is a really nice career. It's a wonderful career with great pay and benefits. It's a world of different things you can choose to do, whether it's fabricating metal, welding pipe, learning electrical schematics, jumping into technology like AutoCAD or Revit. Construction typically has a bad rep brought on by a negative spotlight. Movie, TikTok trends, things like that get embedded into young brains, when in reality, it's a limitless world of possibility and career growth. So to combat this, our company, Hermanson, and our partners will try to host events for high school kids so we can tell our real world stories about what construction really is. I would encourage everybody else to do the same thing. If you're on the fence about going to college, then weighing the benefits of jumping into a skilled trade, making great money to start your life is a wonderful opportunity. The one thing you can't teach is the ability to get up and go to work. Some of the younger generation expects things to be handed to them. But if you can show a little motivation and, a willingness to learn, you can get your life going in a pretty good direction inside construction. So kind of changing the trend of what construction is will go a long ways in getting, replenishing the workers that we're losing. We're losing more than we're gaining. So.
That was, thank you for that. And it can't be overstated. The perception of the industry needs to change. And I think that, to Ken's point, he was mentioning folks not going back to college or not seeing college as being necessary given the influx of jobs created versus folks that are willing to fill them. I think it'll be it'll be a reset, a mental reset for some folks to see, well, I could either take this much debt coming out of college, potentially finding a job to cost over it, or going maybe a trade route, as you say, and then learning that, like electricians can pull 6 figures easy and be their own boss. And there's another world out there that a lot of people look past because they see it as lesser than having a college degree, and it just couldn't be further from the truth. some of the smartest guys I've ever met, guys and girls, or were all trades folks, and they could run laps around me. So, so let's see, got some more questions in the chat. I believe, yeah, this one's for you, Ken. With increases expected in interest rate, which markets do you see being impacted first and most?
Well, I may have 40 years of experience, but I've never been able to predict interest rates or commodity prices successfully. Nevertheless, at the moment, I don't see the increasing interest rates causing a pullback in non-residential construction. So many businesses are in a good cash position right now. State governments and many local governments are also seeing their own tax revenues come in strongly, and they have a lot of unspent money that came from different federal relief programs over the last 2 years. So a lot less interest sensitivity than we typically have at this point in the business cycle. Now, single family home building, yes, that certainly will be sensitive to the rising mortgage rates. I see they went up almost 1/4 of a percentage point in the last week again. So more and more people will be priced out of buying that first-time home in particular. But nevertheless, I think even single-family construction is in for a good year. And multifamily construction, while it also has some sensitivity to interest rates, I think it's well positioned to keep growing this year.
Awesome, thank you. Matt, I'm not sure if you would like to offer anything out, or if we'd like to move on to the next question. I'm not sure. You're good? Okay. I got the thumbs up. So we got another question in the chat. Is AGC aware of any national or global efforts to realign the supply chain to reduce dependency on international suppliers, whether through the means of improving technology or investing more in our national infrastructure, or rather national manufacturing?
Yeah, certainly there's a lot of rhetoric about that, and there have been some moves to bring manufacturing production back to the U.S. The Biden administration has certainly been pushing hard in a number of ways, but some of those we think are self-defeating. We think, for instance, keeping high tariffs on steel and on specific products that manufacturers in this country need as components, that is really discouraging U.S. manufacturing and making it less competitive. There's also legislation that would bring a lot of federal money to building semiconductor manufacturing facilities, and also battery production, electrified vehicle production, and other specific categories of production. In a previous part of my life, I worked for a presidential commission on industrial competitiveness that looked at how the U.S. could become more competitive. And so many of these ideas were being kicked around a long time ago. My own view is that we need to have less government intervention. We don't benefit generally from picking winners and losers or putting in artificial barriers to trade. But this is just one of those highly contentious areas that it's going to be fought out industry by industry and product by product. So I think the major problem for construction at the moment is not so much where goods are manufactured, but how they're getting delivered. That we have these huge backlogs of ships off the ports. Initially, it was principally Long Beach and Los Angeles, but now even East Coast ports are so stuffed with containers that they can't unload ships as timely as before. The containers can't move inland because there aren't enough chassis. What happened to the chassis? They're sitting under containers that are outside of warehouses that are also full. And there aren't enough truck drivers, or in some cases train crews, to move all of them. So I see it as more of a transportation problem than a manufacturing sourcing problem.
Yeah, I recently, we'd have to do a little bit of a deeper dive, but I believe Ford actually throttled one of their plants next to our neighbors to the north due to actual supply chain. They weren't able to get parts in. So they throttled back to, I think, half staff, half capacity So it's coming from every direction, it seems like these days. But
Yeah, in fact, I just read a really interesting book. I'm not getting money out of plugging this, but it's called Arriving Today. It's by a Wall Street Journal columnist, Christopher Mims, who writes their keywords column about technology. And he traces the whole supply chain from a ship in Vietnam carrying materials, the USB parts made there, to the West Coast. He goes through the ports. He goes with a long haul truck driver. He goes through an Amazon fulfillment center. He rides with a UPS driver making the final delivery. So you really learn a lot of details about how the supply chain has evolved, why we have it the way we do, what might happen next. Ironically, or perhaps fittingly, my copy of Arriving Today did not arrive on the day expected.
that's wonderful and very fitting. Anyway, sorry. We got another question. I tried to read this twice and I couldn't really make sense of it. I'll give it another shot. Cleveland Cliffs just idled 2 northern Minnesota mining operations through the fall of 2022. The sentence being seems contrary to the supply chain crunch and steel prices. How does this make sense? I read that question twice and I couldn't really figure out the question, but take your best stab at it.
Sure, and I'm not a steel expert, and I wasn't aware of that particular situation, but I know that the taconite or the ore that is mined in northern Minnesota that has historically fed into basic oxygen furnaces, to blast furnaces, and steel production over the last several decades has been shifting more and more to electric arc furnaces that depend much more on scrap as the raw material than what comes out of U.S. mines. So it may be that a reflection of how they're shifting their production, and that we really do have excess capacity on that side. On the electric arc side, not so much. In fact, just earlier this month, both U.S. Steel and Nucor announced investments on the order of $2 to $3 billion in additional steel plants, one to be in Arkansas and one, I think, West Virginia. So we are getting more steel capacity, not just those, but there have been several other examples in the U.S. and also in Mexico and Canada. And hopefully we can work out the transportation of what those plants produce in order to help Matt and other businesses get product in time.
Well said. So we have no more questions in the chat, but we do, as we had discussed a little bit, we have some questions that we had prepared for the both of you prior to this engagement. So I think we'll go through those. Starting first at a high level with you, Ken, and Matt, at any point, if you want to jump in or vice versa, I will direct the questions, but feel free to engage. What is the biggest threat and biggest opportunity right now to the construction industry?
I guess if you'd asked me a month ago, I would have said the biggest threat was another wave like Omicron. Omicron has retreated so rapidly, it makes me more hopeful that if we do get yet another wave of coronavirus or something similar, that we would get past it with less damage to the working age population and the healthcare system. But nevertheless, I don't want to dismiss that threat because Omicron came up so rapidly and it really did stress hospitals a great deal for several weeks. But I think that in terms of the most enduring threat, it's the logistics, that it's going to take a long time to find enough truck drivers and perhaps train crews or longshoremen. And frankly, we have an additional threat on that front coming up in the middle of this year. The longshoremen's agreement with the maritime companies expires mid-year, and so we could have a repeat of a strike that was really devastating a couple of decades ago, affecting all of the West Coast ports.
Yeah, and you might have noticed the screen moved a little bit. That's my bad. I was trying to click the Q&A function and I ended up clicking the screen and bouncing out of it. So my apologies on that. Didn't mean to trip you up. Michael will come in and hopefully get us back where we were at. But in the meantime, Matt, looking at you in your role, what's the biggest effect that technology has made on the field of design and construction?
Yeah. So for Hermanson on the construction side, as a mechanical contractor, our ability to control or change design, depending on what it is, whether it's a design build, integrated design, or even plan and spec, changes the landscape of what we're doing. So like, for example, 25 years ago, we would have a paper drawing. We would estimate off of it, bid off of it, do takeoffs off of them. And then we would go in to construct and find issues. It was handled via RFI. So what happens is construction for that part of the building stops until the answers come back. Schedules have to change orders are processed, money is spent, time is wasted. 25 years ago, designs happened much differently with less collaboration because technologies just didn't exist like they do now. Fast forward to February 17th, 2022, on most major project jobs, at least in our area, an architect's drawing in Revit, same as an engineer. And now on the construction side for Hermanson, all of our detailers are living in the same world. 2 years ago, we jumped into Revit for all of our production. So now collaboration is opened up with full transparency. We have an integrated design project hosted on BIM 360 or Autodesk Build that hosts an architect's life model, an engineer's life model, all the trades models. So if our detailers and designers are drawing and notice something that in the design that just will not work, do you know how much easier it is to get a quick meeting together, whether it's Zoom, Teams? There's so many technologies out there that you can just call and share your screen. A GC if he needs to review. So you can come up. So you can come up with a solution that everybody agrees to. We find a problem, model it live, agree to it. When it comes down to writing an RFI, the process is much smoother. We've already met, discussed, come up with a solution that everybody can see in the model because the solution was also modeled. This is possible now because everybody can collaborate and draw within the same technologies. Even if other subs are in different softwares, things like Navisworks makes cross-platform integration simple and ties us all together in the same world, same environment anyways. This just wasn't possible 25 years ago. Then you fast forward, flip to the construction side. Now we've gone through design, it's time to build a building. At the end of a project design, each discipline's model contains a plethora of data. In 2022, all of us are up against supply chain issues. We've talked about it a couple times. So leveraging 3D BIM models for material acquisition is more important than ever. We can produce a bill of materials list for ordering months before it's needed to be installed. What does that do? It ensures we can make schedules, meet deadlines for all of our clients, stage materials if you want to order in bulk. Where's it all going to be stored? We can plan all of this much better now because of technology. And then, of course, prefabrication, how we get information from softwares like Revit and AutoCAD to our shops is critical. All that work goes into drawing sheet metal, gets sent to our laser cutter through an MAJ, gets processed, the patterns and developments are cut out automatically through software and technology. And then it runs its way through the shop, and we want to assemble as much of that in the shop because it's cleaner, safer, and more productive. It makes us all more money, and we're all in this together. So to communicate with our shop and field, we leverage different softwares like Stratus or Forge viewers to communicate with our shops. Same with Autodesk Build. We post our shop drawings and models in that platform so our field guys can access this information anytime, anywhere. Technology has definitely streamlined workflow from design to construction.
I was just thinking to myself, you could take my job. You got it down. Yeah, no, thank you. And I having worked on your side of the industry for a large MEP manufacturer, I do remember the stressors of the long lead items like an air handling unit when all you wanted to do is have that approved. I can't imagine what that would feel like in today's environment. I truly can't. Just to think about like getting a Sigler air handling unit of decent size. I mean, trying to front load that into the design and getting that approved and marked off, structural, like all the things, all the facets, and then having the supply chain issue on the back end, and then the schedule. I can't. It's hard to imagine.
Yeah, and opening up collaboration, right? From the construction workers to the architects and engineers, we're all talking together, daily. That's how this process is much smoother. Everybody, I can't say there's never any surprises, but we try to limit that, right? And then that's just going to make the project go smoother.
Absolutely. Well said. So Ken, I'm going to come back to you with this one. What can construction firms do right now that'll have the biggest impact on their projects based on the economic data that you've gone over today?
Well, there's no miracle cure for these many problems Matt and I have brought up, but I keep hearing that good communication is really essential, and I guess being nimble. So when you hear from a supplier that that shipment you expected tomorrow won't be coming for 2 months, you got to go right away to the owner and discuss with them how that's going to affect the schedule, whether they want to consider some alternative material or design to accommodate this kind of delay. But certainly before you get to that stage, if you can get the owner to engage on sharing the risk. Matt talked about buying materials, getting deliveries sooner. If the owner is willing to pay sooner for those materials, to give you a full set of drawings so you know exactly what it is you're ordering, what quantity and specs, and so you don't hold off until you normally did, then you have a better chance of sticking to schedule. But it does mean that somebody's got to pay for the storage, perhaps for the insurance, to take on some risk that the specs or the quantity weren't right. If you can get owners to engage in a price sharing cost adjustment agreement. AGC is one of 40 associations that sponsors or subscribes to consensus docs, which is a suite of construction documents that includes a price adjustment clause that works symmetrically. So if a price comes down, say on lumber or steel, and you've specified how to adjust that, then the owner gets to share in some of those savings. If the price goes up, it means that the contractor doesn't have to put in as big a contingency in their bid because they know that the owner will step in and pay part of that price increase. So those are some of the things that can help make a project go more smoothly from the outset, and perhaps reduce that adversarial relationship that is so often propped up between owners, contractors, and suppliers.
Yeah, and I'd offer anybody that's listening, if they're curious about what a contract that would look like, I'd say go read up on an IFOA or integrated form of agreement. That is the closest thing I've ever seen to shared risk that I think exists out there, and it's just an interesting framework if you ever want to dive deeper into that idea with regards to shared pain, shared rewards, and incentivizing teaming, I guess would be the way to summarize it. So Matt, coming to you, what strategy changes have you or your firm specifically made to adapt to the current climate when it comes to technology and project?
Yeah, so you have two different approaches. You can have a top-down or a bottom-up approach. I honestly believe that you need a hybrid approach if you're taking that vision on. Initially, we took a top-down approach for some of the newer technology we've implemented over the last couple of years. We met with trusted partners like USCAT to help identify new tech, pour over meeting after meeting with our partners to come up with a vision that you need to believe in, that will help your company. This then needs to be explained and processed internally at a high level. Get buy-in from your executive team, stakeholders, owners, that this vision will become reality. Then you invest. Come up with the first phase plan, start explaining it, implementing it to your team. And now the next step is bottom up, which is more important than the top down. Now you live within the software. There's no cruise control in technology ever. It's quite opposite. Now you need to sit with your end users In our case, no matter what technology I'm trying to integrate at Hermanson, I'm sitting with our foremen, our shop guys, our detailers. Each discipline, within each discipline, there requires focused attention. We have a team that is not shy about telling me how they want the software to work or look like, or what they would like to see different, or how we can improve. This is exactly where I want to be. Just catching these ideas all over the place and then making them turn into reality. Analyzing them, coming up with a solution to make technology a tool that makes us all better. And if it's something that I can't figure out, we reach out to partners like USCAD or directly to Autodesk or any the startups that we work with, and get direct help to find solutions. That's where I'm at with the approach to technology and implementation for what we do.
Yeah, and during our preparatory call, I told you this. It's best explained that it's hybrid. You need that executive buy-in, but the grassroots and the end users need to also buy. You can't force it down and you can't push it up. It really, yeah, you have to look at it from a hybrid approach. And I did appreciate you telling. It's a good frame of reference that I think sometimes often forgot. And yeah, technology for technology's sake is never a winning formula. There's for how tech adverse the construction industry has historically been. We're not short on options with regards to what technologies you can engage with. There's thousands of point solutions out there. So we love working with companies like yourself at Hermanson and offering our insight and our best practices with regards to that. And I appreciate your shameless plug there. And I'm sure the marketing team does too. I'm looking at time. So there's about 3 minutes left. And I kind of want to create a little bit of more of an open dialogue between the three of us when not regarding predictions, because, Ken, I like that, I don't have a crystal ball, but I have the rearview mirror. I enjoy that. I think that's a good way to look at things. But if you could say advice or, to the folks on the call and, in a minute flat, what is it that you'd want to take away, Ken, from your presentation, and Matt, from your experience with technology to, provide maybe a guiding light? Like what would you like them to walk away with?
Well, what I've learned is expect the unexpected. Certainly, none of us anticipated a week-long freeze in Texas that shut down the production of all of the resins that produce so many construction plastics, or that a ship would get stuck in the Suez Canal, let alone for 6 days, and that in turn would affect shipments across the Pacific to the US, and just an endless list of improbable events that happen and had a widespread or long-lasting effect on construction. And so the takeaway, beyond just be prepared for the next disaster hitting you, is be nimble, be flexible, build a resilient chain within your own company and with your suppliers and your owners, so that you can all adapt as quickly as possible to look for alternative supplies, alternative production schedules, or production methods. And I think that because of the technology such as you guys are offering, it is possible to have a lot more flexibility, a lot more nimbleness than had been the case. But everybody has to work at that to make it really as effective as it should be.
Yeah, if you're trying to find a silver lining to this whole experience that we've all gone through, it's brought a magnifying glass on the break, or where you're most exposed as a company and where you need to shore up your abilities, capabilities, supply chain, all that. So if you're trying to grasp for one, that's a very clear example. And then Matt, to you, what's your takeaway? What do you want people to walk away with? Where do they start?
So, whenever you're going to start investing in technology, you want to believe in the software you're investing in. Don't look to other companies and think, well, company X is using this, so we should too. You'll come across situations that present 4 different softwares that do similar things. Do your research, get buy-in from the team that will implement the software, and most importantly, get buy-in from the end users. If your entire organization is pointed the same direction and believe in what you're doing, it makes new tech adoption, training, and implementation a much smoother process.
Love it. Well, we're right at the top of the hour, so I appreciate all of you. Oh, I went to the wrong way. I'm pretty good at this. By that I mean I'm not great at this. There we go. So yeah, you guys I can't do this. Michael, I think I'm fighting you on the controls. For everyone that's still with us, I appreciate you guys' time. I thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our presenter, Ken Simonson. I always enjoy our engagements. And Matt, it was a pleasure having you with us and sharing your insights and giving your, kind of your 1 minute synopsis. I think a lot of people that resonates. And as far as my last, go-to, if you're going to look to take advantage of this, I'd say these are the 3 next steps you can look to. Take advantage of USCAD's complementary discovery. That's how you uncover problems or potential ideal future states with regards to your technology stack. To Matt's point earlier, we are DVIA's sponsor, not to conflict with AGC, but we are their podcast sponsor this year for Design Build Delivers podcast. We're a proud sponsor of it. And there's already episodes out now. And then, as Michael mentioned in the beginning, we did release the Construction Cosmos. In the recording and the email that follows this engagement, there will be a link to that Cosmos. And that's where you can keep up to date with our next webinars, all the content we have coming out. And we look forward to engaging with you on that platform. So again, I would say thank you to everyone. Appreciate you for staking a minute over for those of you still with us. And again, wishing you guys all the best. Take care, and thank you for joining us today.